Hi, this is Jundo. Welcome to Tree Leaf. First off, my thanks to all the people who wrote to ask about my son Leon. He's doing much better, and so is his papa. I got some sleep. But today I'd like to talk about anxiety. A couple of people, by coincidence, raised the subject of anxiety with me today, and I thought I'd talk about it. They asked, does Zazen help with anxiety? Well, my experience is generally yes. I used to be someone who suffered from anxiety a lot more than I do now. I don't want to say that I don't sometimes worry about the future. What if I get sick? What if the house burns down? It crosses my mind. I still have, to take a deep breath before I get on an airplane sometimes. But compared to the way it used to be, I think I handle anxiety with blowing it off into thin air. You see, our approach to anxiety is, I think, dependent on the type of anxiety it is. Now, let me just paint this with very broad strokes. There are some types of anxiety, I think, that are largely just a figment of the imagination. I call it the boogeyman under the bed. What if you're suddenly struck with the fear that a meteor is going to come crashing through the ceiling and hit you on the head? Or even a fear of flying sometimes. The odds are so small that it's very unlikely you're going to be one of the people who ends up in the Hudson River. So, what can you do in that situation? Well, as we sit zazen, dropping thoughts of this and that, dropping resistance, our sense of self softening, even fading away, we find as the mind quiets, the fear begins to dissipate. When the mind stops thinking of the fear is gone, like the boogeyman under the bed. When you stop thinking about him, he's not there. But there are other types of fear that are real. For example, let's say in this economy you're worried about losing your job. That'll sometimes bring a cold sweat to the back of your neck. How about Zazen in that case? Well, I think Zazen is helpful there too. Unfortunately, it may not help you get a new job, but it will help you more approach the situation realistically, just as it is, without excess fears and emotions. As we sit Zazen, allowing the mind to calm, we see that life is just what it is. And again, there is just the fact of sometimes we lose our job. You may still have fear there of losing your job, but you see things are going to settle quite a bit, because as the mind settles, as the mind calms, the fear calms. And I'm not going to say that you're going to be dancing down the street saying, I lost my job, yippee. That's not what I mean. But you're going to be more settled with the fact, more open to the fact. So that's another way that Zazen approaches anxiety. Now, there are some types of anxiety. I had someone who was very close to me who had agoraphobia, a fear of leaving the house. They couldn't shake it. What about a case like that? Well, I'm going to discuss that two ways. Number one, if you do have an anxiety, you cannot shake. Some people say that when they sit zazen, they just get anxiety comes up. All kinds of things can come up in zazen. What should they do? Just sit with the anxiety. Just let it be. Almost as if you're observing it on the palm of your hand. There is the anxiety. There it just is. We sit zazen open to everything and nothing particular in the room, like the chair, the table over there. It's just there. Same with your anxiety. It's just there. If you're scared, be scared. But a funny thing happens when you do that. When you just allow the anxiety to be, it loses some of its fire. Some of the fuel is going. You see, I think there's two parts to the anxiety. There's the anxiety itself, And then there's the resistance to the anxiety, and I wish I wasn't anxious. It may be easier to see with grief or sadness. I had someone who lost a loved one, and they felt deep grief, and they said, well, Zazen helped me lose my grief. And I said, you probably don't want to do that. Sit with the grief. And as they sat with the grief was still there. But by dropping the resistance to the grief, it lost part of its fire and just became a natural and expected part of life. Well, the anxiety in that case too may still be there, but it's going to lose some fuel when you stop resisting it. And finally, I want to say this. There are many psychological conditions that Zazen doesn't do a darn thing for. Zazen isn't a cure-all for everything. It won't fix a flat tire, won't cure your acne. Well, there are many psychological conditions where you should see a professional. It's not going to cure all forms of depression. It may help with some forms of depression involved in overthinking, anxiety, like I mentioned, agoraphobia. They have wonderful other treatments for that. Go see a specialist. Go see a doctor who may be able to help you, especially if it's a very serious condition that's interfering with your life. Okay? Well, if you're not afraid, shall we sit Zazen? I'm going to start talking about Bendowa next week. We'll get a good running start on that.